My daughter yelled, "Go live with the rats." What I discovered inside the shed is incredible. John's heart sank as the words exploded from Lily's mouth, each syllable striking deep like shards of glass. Go live with the rats. The truth was, he could feel the weight of those words settling into his bones, dragging him down into a pit of despair. A simple argument about bills had spiraled into something bigger, something he couldn't manage. He was a failure. A father who had lost his job and couldn't find a way to pull them out of the financial mess that surrounded them. The garage where he had spent more than a decade wrenching and fixing cars was gone, locked away with the laughter and dreams of yesteryear. How had it come to this? Lily didn't understand. She couldn't see the stress etched into his face every time the bills arrived. The constant cycle of worry, desperation gnawing at him like a rat in the corner of his mind. With a trembling breath, he turned toward the backyard shed they had neglected for too long, a grim relic from better days that now stood like a mausoleum filled with forgotten memories. As he reached for the rusted handle, all he could think about was the life they once had, the warmth of family dinners, the laughter shared over silly jokes, memories buried under layers of dust. The door creaked open, releasing a cloud of stale air and an assortment of ancient tension. Inside, the chaos was palpable, blackened tools, yellowed photographs, forgotten toys from ages past. The list of disappointments pressed heavily on his chest, but it was a stack of journals nestled at the bottom that froze him in place. He hadn't expected to see them. The journals belonged to his grandfather. John hesitated. This was a man who had dreamed big, a man with ideas that never came to fruition because there were bills to pay and mouths to feed. Now, staring down at the faded pages, he felt a sense of connection, a tether to a legacy he had long since disregarded. But his excitement soon plummeted into dread. What if he failed like his grandfather? What if the dreams he clung to only echoed through the halls of economic despair? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The words faded as he flipped through page after page, soaking in sketches and dreams shelved by reality. An idea flickered at the corners of his mind. Could he revive one of these inventions? But heavy was the doubt. It loomed like a storm cloud. He envisioned walking into the local business office to pitch his newfound inspiration, only to be met with disinterest and mockery. Memories of the businessman's disdainful laughter echoed in his mind, tightening his throat. Living off dreams won't pay the bills, the man had scoffed, haunting him with each word. John's resolve waned as he grappled with the haunting familiarity of failure. As he prepared for a pivotal presentation that could change everything, his muscles tightened with anxiety and fear. How could he possibly rewrite their narrative when he felt so small? Would history repeat itself, or could he carve out a different path for Lily? Each breath was a reminder of his responsibility, equal parts dread and hope swirling together, leaving him paralyzed at the edge of this newfound ambition. He was at a crossroads with ghosts of the past swirling around him, and he had to choose. The stakes were higher than ever. The crisp morning air hung heavy with the scent of autumn, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in John's mind. He couldn't escape the looming weight of the presentation. Every tick of the clock echoed the immeasurable divide he felt between the man he desired to be and the father he believed he was failing to materialize. A sense of urgency gnawed at him. If he was going to reclaim any semblance of stability for Lily, he needed to act, to confront this pivotal moment rather than shy away. Standing there in the shed, surrounded by remnants of dreams long forsaken, a flicker of determination surged within him. He leaned over the journals, now filled with possibilities, ideas that could lead to innovative solutions, products that might resonate in a world that seemed to turn its back on dreamers. Each page turned was less a reminder of past failures and more an invitation to create something new. Could this be his moment of rebirth? As he thumbed through one particularly detailed sketch, envisioning the device outlined on the parchment, John felt a jolt of energy. A simple invention aimed at simplifying household tasks, something his grandfather could never realize. What if he could realize it? Visions of their modest home transformed into a space of controlled chaos. The laughter of his daughter ringing out amidst the clinking of tools and the scent of fresh paint lit a fire within him. He could feel the shackles of doubt tightening around him, squeezing the air from his lungs. But what if it wasn't enough? He questioned silently. What if I fail? The specter of past attempts haunted him again. Those days of launching smaller projects that had floundered in the marketplace. The biting remarks of critics replayed in an endless loop. Yet, the thought of Lily's disappointment fueled his fear. He couldn't walk away from this opportunity. Not now. Taking a deep breath, he decided to implement a plan. The journals provided a guide, a framework to channel his ambitions into something tangible. He would develop the most straightforward prototype, focusing on a single idea that inspired him the most. It would be manageable, less daunting as he fought against the internal storm. Failure might still lurk, but with careful steps, perhaps he could keep it at bay. He spent the next few days working in secret, poring over the blueprints and sketches, his hands becoming familiar with the tools that had once been extensions of himself in better times. Each late night spent tinkering brought a sense of fulfillment, the tangible connection between effort and progress, igniting something deep inside, something that lit a path through the fog of uncertainty. However, as he engineered solutions, more profound questions flooded in. What if his priorities were misaligned? Could he truly balance chasing dreams while catering to the needs of a family that had begun to dribble away from the promises of his aspirations? Every hour spent developing his idea pulled him away from Lily. He could see it in her eyes when she emerged from her room, searching for connection over breakfast. Each glance filled with unspoken words echoed the conflict growing within him. The looming presentation date approached relentlessly, and with it, the sensation of urgency morphed into a knife-edge focus. He knew he had to confront not only the doubts within, but also the external world that had brought him low. And then, just as he was gathering his materials for the presentation, an unexpected call shattered his preparations. A familiar voice on the other end, one that had once been heavy with contempt, now dripped with an insidious curiosity. "John, I've been following your recent endeavors. Let's talk." What did that mean? Would he have to contend with yet another specter of his past? Or could there be an opportunity nestled within the uncertainty? The clock ticked ominously, the tension thickening as John stood on the precipice of an encounter that could twist the outcome of all that he had built. Maybe this time, things would be different, he thought, the resolve hardening within him. The moment of truth approached, and with it, the chance to redefine his journey, and to show Lily that failure didn't mean surrendering one's dreams. What awaited him on the other side of that call? As the phone slipped from his hand and landed on the workbench, John felt a surge of anxiety course through him. The voice on the other end, once a familiar source of ridicule, now hung in the air like a specter waiting to reveal its intentions. He had built walls against that old self, stacked bricks of resilience from countless failures, and yet here it was, tempting him with memories best left undisturbed. He had to decide, not just about the meeting, but about the man he wanted to become. Days melted into nights as he grappled with the implications of the call. The presentation loomed closer, its shadow a constant reminder of what was at stake. John's prototype lay half-assembled, the tools spread across the table like fragments of his mind. Each tool was a promise to himself and to Lily. He could restore that vision, but first, he had to confront the past. He paced in the shed, the wooden floor creaking beneath his weight. Each step was both affirming and paralyzing, tethered to memories that bore down on him like an anchor. What if he failed again? What if he let down not only himself, but Lily? He could almost feel her disappointment creeping into his chest, a ghostly whisper reminding him of the promises he had made. Yet amidst the doubt, he felt a flicker of something else, a belief that he could turn setbacks into stepping stones. Determined to banish lingering shadows, he composed his thoughts for the call. He would confront not just the voice, but the fear that echoed it. Clarity emerged as he organized his ideas, each one encapsulated in a few gripping sentences that demanded attention. The prototype wasn't just a project, it was a representation of his growth, of hard lessons distilled into experience. When the day of the call arrived, John's hands trembled slightly as he dialed the number. He fortified himself with deep breaths, grounding his thoughts in poise. As the person on the other end picked up, John's pulse quickened. "Hello?" The unmistakable tone of interest greeted him, tinged with an edge he hadn't heard in years. "Hi, it's John," he stated, his voice steadying as he identified himself. "Thanks for reaching out." Their conversation unfurled under the weight of curiosity and historical tension. His former colleague sought updates on his latest project, an innocent enough inquiry, but the edge of enthusiasm was laced with skepticism. John reeled back in time, recalling the dismissals that had stung. But instead of succumbing to defensiveness, he shared details about the prototype, the intricacies of its design, and the purpose behind it. Each point was delivered with a calmness that surprised him. He spoke not just of the object he was creating, but the vision he had for a better life for Lily. "Interesting," the voice responded, the intrigue palpable. "Have you considered potential partnerships? I might know a few people who'd be interested." Each proposal fired new neurons in John's mind. Could he open the door to collaboration rather than isolation? The idea bloomed, accompanied by a flicker of excitement that warmed his resolve and nudged aside the encroaching doubts. The call ended with promises of a follow-up, leaving John invigorated but apprehensive. Would he be able to truly embrace this new direction? Was he ready to collaborate with someone who had once been a tormentor? The uncertainty clawed at him, yet within the turmoil he sensed an opportunity blooming. As he returned to his workbench, he glanced at the incomplete prototype, a manifestation of both his struggles and aspirations. He needed Lily to see him conquer this journey, to witness her father rise as a creator, not just in the eyes of others, but through the eyes of his daughter. Suddenly, a knock at the shed door pulled him from his contemplation. "Dad? Can I come in?" Lily's voice sliced through the tension, laced with vulnerability that cut deep. He hesitated, leaving a world of possibilities half complete. "Yes, honey, just a moment." The blend of fear and hope swirled within him. Was he ready to share his dreams and aspirations with her? There was so much to tell. He drew a deep breath, standing on the precipice of a conversation that might reshape their futures, and with it, the clarity of who he was becoming. As Lily entered, her presence ignited a problem John hadn't anticipated. What if she didn't understand the sacrifices he was making? The air thickened with unspoken words, and John faced a choice: open up about his mission or maintain the barriers shielding her from failure's shadows. "Dad?" She looked at him, searching, anchoring his racing thoughts. The moment ebbed, poised for transformation. Would he nurture their shared bond, or conceal the reality swirling about them? One response could carve a path to openness, the other, a return to silence. "Let's talk," he said, feeling the coast of his uncertain new world shift beneath him. What truth lay in the weight of their conversation? What revelation awaited in nurturing that vital connection? John felt a weight hanging in the air between him and Lily, an uncharted territory filled with the unspoken. He wanted to reach for the words that would connect them, but the fear of vulnerability wrapped around him like a chain. Her innocent gaze begged for guidance, for authenticity. In that split second, he realized he stood at a crossroads, not just in this conversation, but in his life. "Dad," she pressed, urgency creeping into her voice. "What's going on with your project? Can you tell me more about it?" The inquiry was simple, yet it rattled through him like a thunderclap. This was the moment he could either embrace honesty or retreat into the shadows of his insecurities. The stakes felt monumental. He couldn't shape his connection with her through silence. He couldn't mask the struggles he faced. Those very struggles were paving the way for growth, for both of them. Taking a deep breath, he started. "Well, remember when we talked about inventors and how they create things? I'm working on something of my own, something I believe could really help people." Lily's eyes widened with interest. "Is it the thing you've been tinkering with in the shed?" "Yeah," he replied, gesturing toward the prototype. Its silhouette loomed behind him. It was more than wood and metal. It was a reflection of his journey, the culmination of his aspirations and fears. "What does it do?" she asked, her youthful excitement cutting through the tension. "It's designed to help families save energy," John explained, nervous energy crackling in his voice. "But it's about more than just saving resources. It's about creating a life that's better for you." "What do you mean?" Lily leaned in, intrigued by his passion, her childlike curiosity a balm for his anxiety. John's heart raced as he divulged the details, speaking not just of the technical aspects, but of the motivation behind them. "I want you to know that no matter how hard things get, the effort we put into building something worthwhile is always worth it. I'm doing this for you, to show you that you can always rise, even from the hardest setbacks." Lily nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. The way she listened, captivated, ignited a spark within him. For the first time, he felt the walls that had fortified his emotional paralysis begin to crack. He was teaching her about resilience, not just through mere instruction, but through real-life experience. "But what if you fail, Dad?" she asked, innocence mingling with understanding. "What if it doesn't work out?" Her question sliced through him, sharp and revealing. Would she inherit his fears if he failed to confront them? In that moment, he realized this was the crux of his battle, not merely with his project, but the lesson that defined him as a father. "Failure is just a part of the journey, Lily," he said, voice steadying with newfound resolve. "What matters is that we keep trying. Each setback teaches us something important. I want you to see it as a stepping stone." As he spoke, he internalized the very lesson he was sharing, recognizing the power of mindset. His self-doubt had often boxed him in, limiting his potential. With every word, he tore down another piece of that confinement. "I think you're going to build something amazing," she smiled, her eyes sparkling with belief in him. Her affirmation filled him with warmth. Sharing this moment not only strengthened their bond, but ignited a fire he thought he had quelled. He promised himself that he would dedicate time to this vision, to his growth, and to teaching Lily that authenticity was born from embracing imperfections. The air shifted as he sensed a ripple of urgency beneath the surface of their discussion, something larger yet unformed. While they explored this new connection, John's mind was already racing ahead. Lily's belief in him felt empowering, but it posed questions regarding the upcoming partnership that loomed on the horizon. Would he be brave enough to truly collaborate with someone from his past? As if reading his thoughts, Lily said, "So, are you going to work with that guy again? The one who called?" "Yes, I am," John replied, his voice firm yet laced with doubt. The prospect of collaboration stirred both excitement and trepidation in him. Reconnection could lead to a chance at redemption, but it also meant confronting his old demons. "Are you scared?" she asked, the innocence in her voice striking a chord deep within. "Absolutely," he admitted, meeting her gaze. "But I have to face that fear if I want to move forward." He felt an unsettling thrill coursing through him as this conversation unraveled into unforeseen territory. What if engaging with the past meant not only unlocking professional potential, but also addressing unresolved personal conflicts? Lily brightened. "You can do it, Dad. I believe in you." With her words cradling his resolve, John mustered the determination to take on whatever lay ahead. He was on the threshold of a transformation that demanded complete bravery, but he felt ready to embrace it. As they shared a tentative smile, the shed, filled with potential and the remnants of his old self, suddenly felt expansive, alive with possibilities. But in that moment of newfound hope, uncertainty circled just beyond their horizon, whispering questions yet unanswered. What would the follow-up meeting hold? Would he successfully navigate the complexities of collaboration without losing his vision? As John contemplated these looming challenges, he felt the weight of responsibility, not just as an inventor, but as a father. A transformed path awaited him, yet deep down, he recognized that the moments of truth lay ahead. Together, they forged onward. The journey was just beginning, yet the stakes could not have felt higher. With Lily beside him, he could no longer ignore the tides of uncertainty that awaited his response. The time had come to face not just a call to action, but the culmination of everything he believed he could become. What awaited him on the other side of that call could redefine not only himself, but also the legacy he would leave for Lily. The morning sun filtered through the shed's grimy windows, casting long shadows across the cluttered floor. John stood before the prototype, its contours sharper and more promising in the light. He had always treated this space as a refuge, a canvas for his restless mind. Now it represented a crossroads, one that was poised to challenge both his professional ambition and personal growth. Staring at the creation before him, he felt a burning resolve swell within. The project had become a metaphor for everything he was learning, about resilience, about purpose, about navigating the intimidating waters of collaboration. Today was the day he would reach out to his former partner, Mark. That lingering voice of self-doubt whispered incessantly, warning him of the risks. Had he really changed enough to handle this? As he picked up his phone, his hands trembled, not out of fear, but from excitement mixed with anxiety. He had rehearsed this call countless times in his mind. Would he sound confident? Would Mark see the potential he now felt was within grasp? With a deep breath, he pressed Mark's name, listening to the dial tone. The phone rang, blending into the rusty creaks of the shed. Each tone resonated with John's self-questioning. What if Mark rejected him? What if he stumbled over his words? But then, Lily's face flashed in his mind, the unwavering belief she had in him. "Hello?" The voice on the other end broke through his racing thoughts. "Mark, it's John," he said, each word drawing him further from the shackles of his past. Transitioning from silence to dialogue was profoundly liberating. "I wanted to talk about a possibility, about working together again." He paused, feeling the weight of apprehension press down on him. The shared history played in his mind, the triumphs, the disillusionments. John could hear the silence from Mark's end. Had he lost the chance to explain himself? "I know our last project ended poorly," John continued, swallowing hard. "But I've spent a lot of time reflecting on that and on what led to our falling out. I believe this new idea has real potential, and I think we could do it justice together." As he spoke, he instinctively straightened his shoulders. This wasn't just about the business. It was about confronting the specters of his past, proving that he had evolved. Mark's response came slowly. "John, that's a big commitment. You're sure you're ready for it? We both know what we're risking." The concern in Mark's tone echoed the doubts gnawing at John. Was he truly prepared for the scrutiny of another partnership? "I am," he asserted, conviction blossoming. "If we can share our visions and support each other, I believe we can reshape not just this project, but, well, how we work together. I've changed." There was doubt in silence again, but emotions danced beneath it. Despite the uncertainty of their shared history, John refused to falter, bolstered by the inner strength he was slowly nurturing. This would not be the same timid man who had once fallen prey to failure. He realized that success wasn't a destination, but rather a series of courageous decisions. "All right, let's meet," Mark finally said. "I'll want to hear what you've been working on." "Great, I'll send you the details," John replied, relief flooding through him. Ending the call, John took a moment to breathe, letting the reality of his actions settle into his bones. For the first time, confronting his past felt less like a chain holding him back and more like a bridge to something worthwhile. But as exhilaration washed over him, another wave emerged. Fear. What if he couldn't match Mark's expectations? What if he reverted to the doubts that had ensnared him before? He grasped a nearby tool, refocusing on the prototype, whispering a promise. He would not let his worries dictate his journey. In that moment, the shed felt like a crucible, transformative and essential. The walls encased his fears along with his aspirations, capturing the duality of his experience. Each visual element within the space told a story. Remnants of previous projects, fading drawings, the scent of sawdust. They were pieces of a narrative that he had pushed through. Lily's voice echoed in his mind, invigorating him. The legacy he wanted to build didn't hinge just on invention, but on sharing bravery, knowledge, and hard-won introspection with her. He could redefine not just the nature of the partnership, but what it meant to guide a daughter into her own courageous endeavors. Suddenly, a wisp of doubt drifted again. What if this partnership didn't materialize or fell apart once more? What if Mark revisited old wounds? As these thoughts threatened to undermine his resolve, he refocused on the goal, steering away from complacency, engaging in the bittersweet dance of progress. He had multiple layers to his journey ahead: the preparation for the meeting, the possibility of difference, and the emotional tides he needed to navigate. The stakes were becoming ever more complicated, and yet this entanglement of ambition and fear felt oddly exhilarating. With the prototype before him, John understood that whatever awaited, success, failure, or something in between, would serve as fuel on his path to reinvention. He was determined to chase this opportunity, ready to craft not just a new project, but a narrative that would reverberate through every decision. As he gathered his notes and sketches, each step echoed a commitment to growth and learning. He was not confined to the shadows of his past. Instead, he was willing to engage with them, knowing they might lead him to destiny. The questions lingered, wrapped tightly around the horizon of his new venture. Would Mark's acceptance truly signify a collaboration? Or did unresolved issues linger just beneath the surface? What awaited them in the meeting might very well underscore everything he feared. With his heart racing and determination unfurling, John knew he was on the brink of something transformative. But the real challenge loomed ahead, one that would demand he confront not just his fears of failure, but the specters of success itself. Would he be prepared for whatever emerged from this reunion? The following day dawned with the weight of unfulfilled potential pressing on John's shoulders. He could hardly sit still, the clock ticking away moments he wished could stretch into eternity. His breakfast lay untouched, nerves electrifying his system like caffeine, driving thoughts around the implications of his meeting with Mark. Would this be the turning point he desperately needed, or another instance of dashed hopes? Every time he glanced at the prototype, a blend of trepidation and anticipation surged within him. It was more than just machinery. It was an embodiment of his redefined identity. The old John, the one overwhelmed by self-doubt, had been dismantled like one of his projects. Each screw he tightened or bolt he adjusted became a deeper metaphor for his own reinforcement. This time, he would not just stand by. He would build bridges instead of walls. As noon approached, he meticulously organized his sketches, outlining key points he wanted to convey to Mark. Each detail reflected his hard-earned insights, a stark contrast to their last project's impulsive chaos. Yet even as he prepared, fragments of doubt crept in. What if the clarity of his vision fell flat against Mark's skepticism? The nagging thought felt like a faint echo of the past, threatening to resurface as his mind replayed memories of their turbulent collaboration. When it was nearly time to leave, the door creaked open. Lily bounced into the shed, her excitement palpable. Her presence felt grounding as she eyed the blueprint laid across the workbench. "Dad, what's this?" she asked, twisting her hair around her finger, her gaze darting between the drawings and her father's face. "It's a new project I'm working on. Something I might pitch to an old friend today," he replied, the pride in his voice unable to mask the flutter of anxiety beneath. "Can I help?" she inquired, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. It struck him. How often had he underestimated her capabilities? This child had an innate knack for problem-solving that surpassed even his own. John knelt beside her, encouraged by the idea of collaboration. "What do you think about this part?" He pointed to a section of the design, inviting her input. Lily studied it, nodding. "What if it looked more colorful, and you could use these shapes instead?" She grabbed some colored pens, illustrating her vision with infectious enthusiasm. It struck a chord in John, an epiphany unfolding. Was her willingness to embrace creativity a reflection of his renewed path? "You're right. Color can change everything," he mused, warmth flooding him. Sometimes, stepping beyond the routine is necessary. As she showcased her alterations, he took cautious steps back, realizing that he too needed to allow flexibility in his thinking, just as he encouraged her to innovate. Amidst their shared brainstorming, the anxiety surrounding his meeting began to dissolve. Perhaps he didn't have to carry the burden alone. The realization that he could foster this collaborative spirit not only with Mark, but also with Lily, who believed in him wholeheartedly, redirected his perspective. Yet as rehearsal faded with time, reality pressed against him. It wasn't enough just to prepare. At some point, he would have to demonstrate his worthiness, of the partnership, of being a father who inspires rather than just instructs. He glanced at the clock. Time to go. As he slid into his car, a mixture of tension and excitement churned within. The prospect of reconnecting with Mark could lead to a constructive outcome or a painful reminder of past failures. Which would it be? Driving toward the coffee shop where they agreed to meet, landscapes blurred outside the window, trees and storefronts distanced by an escalating heartbeat. Unresolved questions ricocheted in his mind. Had he truly evolved enough? Would Mark accept this new iteration of himself, or see him merely as the remnants of their failures? As he parked, John drew in a deep breath, channeling the love and belief his daughter had just imbued in him. This wasn't just about a business proposition. It was a chance to redefine a personal narrative. Walking inside, he saw Mark perched at a secluded table, his fingers wrapped around a steaming cup. Their eyes met. In that moment, all previous negotiations crumbled into trivialities overshadowed by the weight of their past. John's heart raced, uncertainty dancing with determination inside him. Now, as he approached, he prepared to deliver not just a pitch, but a piece of his soul. Would Mark recognize the change? Would he be willing to co-create a different future? The time had arrived to confront not just the past, but the possibilities of the future. Would he hold on to the fears or embrace the courage to leap into the unknown once more? John approached the table, his heart thundering in his chest like a drumbeat, announcing a battle. Mark's steady gaze made him acutely aware of the stakes. Every ignored moment stretched an eternity, the weight of expectation amplifying the tension around them. He pulled out the prototype, placing it deliberately on the table between them. "Hey, it's been a while," he said, settling into the chair across from Mark, attempting to break the silence hanging like a curtain between them. Mark offered a curt nod, his brow slightly furrowing as he eyed the prototype. "What have you got?" John swallowed hard, forcing himself to remember the vibrant creativity he had shared with Lily just hours ago. "This is my latest project. I've revamped the design entirely based on what we learned from our last collaboration." He leaned forward, determination fueling his voice. "It's efficient, sustainable, and has a user-friendly interface. I believe this could change how we approach our work. Doubt flickered across Mark's face. Last time it felt like we were spinning our wheels. Can you really bring something new to the table? Surging with a newfound confidence, John countered, I am no longer that person who let frustration stifle innovation. I've reflected on my past mistakes, and it's time I embrace them, not as failures, but as lessons. Mark's skepticism was palpable, but John's conviction hardened. As he explained the intricacies of the prototype, weaving in details that demonstrated how he had integrated feedback from his previous experiences, he felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. With each point he articulated, he understood his evolution, not just as an engineer, but as an individual. Mark's expression shifted subtly, his arms uncrossed as he leaned closer. John seized the opportunity, drawing on Lily's spirit and their shared creativity as motivation. He outlined several potential applications for the prototype and shared vibrant anecdotes of collaboration with Lily. The light in his eyes sparked a flicker of interest beneath Mark's studied glare. Your daughter sounds sharp, Mark said, a hint of admiration altering his tone. You're not leading a project alone anymore, are you? The question echoed through John, awakening a realization within him. This was more than a pitch. It represented growth, adopting vulnerability by not carrying the burden in isolation. He offered a smile, recognizing that mentorship wasn't defined by age alone, but by fostering and inviting collaboration. Exactly, John replied, feeling the shaky foundation of his confidence solidify. And I've learned that bringing others into the fold only enhances the outcome. Mark's eyes narrowed contemplatively as he absorbed this. Well, you've certainly presented a compelling case. Let's see if you can back these ideas up with some actionable steps. As they dove deeper into discussion, John noticed a shift. Mark was no longer the stern overseer from the past, but a potential partner who was engaging with his vision. John clung to that flicker, astonished at how much that small sense of hope could light the way forward. Yet amid his triumph, nagging insecurities flickered at the edges of this budding connection. With each positive engagement, an internal voice questioned, was he truly ready to embrace this collaborative journey fully? Would the shadows of previous failures resurface to haunt him, dimming this emerging light? As the coffee shop hummed around them, a new lesson began to emerge. He had to face his fears head-on, not just from Mark, but within himself. The conversation drifted toward logistics, and just as they were outlining a potential path forward, an unexpected rattle echoed through John's mind. What if the prototype's functionality fell short in practical applications? Could he uphold not only his own expectations, but those of anyone who had placed their faith in him? A chill crept in. John steadied himself, aware that the stakes had shifted yet again. This wasn't just about his redemption. It was a shared responsibility now. Mark looked at him, the warmth of approval slowly morphing into a moment of unstable uncertainty. Let's go through the figures again, Mark suggested, his tone shifting back to business-like efficiency. And in that instant, John realized that the path ahead was more complex than he had anticipated. He was on the cusp of facing not just Mark's scrutiny, but the impending weight of expectations he had begun to gather around him. Expectations that could either lift him or bury him under the weight of renewed pressure. In that moment, John felt the urgency rise, pockmarked with exhilaration and anxiety, forcing him to confront not just Mark's perceptions, but his own new identity. How far had he truly come, and could he sustain the climb toward a future that felt brighter but unpredictable? The moment of vulnerability escalated as they plunged into revisions and projections, no turning back. Would he be the architect of his success or the architect of his downfall? Only time would tell, but all he could feel was the call to persist, to learn, and to redefine what success meant on this uncharted path. And just then, in the midst of calculations and conjectures, John heard the words that would shift everything yet again. We need to set some defined expectations moving forward. John raised an eyebrow and leaned in, his breath hitching with the weight of possibilities. How would he navigate this new terrain, and what formidable challenges awaited him? Caught off guard by Mark's directive, John's thoughts spun rapidly. It was one thing to present an idea, but entirely different to navigate the treacherous waters of expectation setting. What did it even mean to have defined expectations? He felt a tightening in his chest, grappling with the implications of accountability. Defined expectations, John echoed, attempting to mask his unease. Do you mean setting performance metrics for the prototype? He searched Mark's face for clues, as if the right words could unlock the next step of their collaboration. Mark leaned back, fingers steepled. Precisely. We need benchmarks to measure progress. A roadmap to visualize our success and provisions for when we fall short. The reality of this hit John harder than anticipated. Could he truly navigate this new landscape filled not just with hopes, but also with measurable goals? The contrast felt stark against the open-ended creativity he had shared with Lily. For a moment, he realized he was wading back into familiar waters, the kind that had almost drowned him before. Right. Benchmarks, John murmured, nodding mechanically. The word felt foreign, like it belonged in a spreadsheet rather than in the creative spark of invention. We could develop a feedback loop with users to assess functionality after each iteration. The tension in his voice faltered. It will allow us to refine the design further based on real-world applications. Mark studied him, intrigued yet unyielding. Good, that's a starting point, but ongoing reviews don't account for unforeseen setbacks. Failures will come, John. They always do. How do you plan to address them? The question tumbled through John's mind like an avalanche, burying his previous exhilaration. His instinct to retreat crept back in, a lifelong companion that urged caution. What if every failure was a personal indictment? The memories of past missteps surged in his mind. Moments when he had misjudged a situation, when he had allowed insecurity to silence his voice. Gathering himself, he responded with a steadiness that surprised him. Every setback is a chance to pivot and re-strategize. I want to foster an environment where feedback isn't feared, but welcomed. Instead of casting failures as detractors, I want to normalize them as part of the creative process. Mark raised his eyebrows, skepticism dissipating slightly. That's refreshing. If you can instigate a culture of iterative learning, you may just have a shot at success. They continued dissecting various scenarios, potential obstacles, and ways to navigate them. John's passion ignited as solutions unfolded. For the first time in a long while, he felt the shadows of doubt retreating. The prospect of building something meaningful, with Mark as an ally rather than an adversary, started to emerge. Still, buried beneath new resolve lurked an unsettling fear. Would the collaboration truly be a partnership, or would he once again find himself in the isolation of his failures? The conversation took a turn, weaving through risks and opportunities until they started discussing timelines. John flattened a piece of paper, pencil in hand, and hastily sketched out a timeline dotted with milestones. In those moments of detailed planning, he felt a surge of purpose. The sharpness of his resolve defined the shape of his dreams. Yet even in his fervor, John sensed something wasn't quite right. Each tick of the pen felt like a countdown. It pressed against him as if time itself was a noose. The more they built the structure around his ideas, the more it felt like a cage. What if the outcomes fell short of expectations? What if reality shattered the framework they were constructing? Time stretched thin as the clock chimed, pulling John back to the present. The bustling cafe faded into the background as he floated in his internal chaos, contemplating the possible fallout of the very benchmarks he had proposed. "Mark," he interjected, the heaviness of his tone commanding attention. "What if things go south despite our best efforts? What if we encounter obstacles we can't predict?" Mark leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You're thinking like a designer now. Anticipate the challenges, but don't let them paralyze you. Instead, embrace them and use them to evolve. Every failure can be a stepping stone toward success. John took a breath, absorbing Mark's words. There was wisdom there, a stark parallel to the collaboration with Lily. Each misadventure had strengthened their bond, deepening their creative exchanges. Yet, would he have the courage to apply that same principle in this new partnership? The confrontation within him began to sharpen. Navigating vulnerability was more challenging than he intended. Reforming his instincts into actionable insights required a courage he wasn't sure he possessed. The weight of expectations loomed larger, and with it, his fear. What if he couldn't sustain the momentum, couldn't uphold the trust he had begun to forge? "Let's take risks, then," John murmured finally, determination creeping back. "Let's celebrate failures as part of this journey." Mark broke into a smile, and John felt a small flicker of faith ignite within him, a shift from buzzing anxiety to a burgeoning resolve. If he could navigate this, maybe he could redefine himself again. As they laid out the groundwork, John suddenly felt a strange mixture of excitement and foreboding. Perhaps he could face this unknown, but could he really shoulder the expectation of collaborative success? As Mark began to summarize their next steps, John felt a rush of adrenaline, but also a sharp pang of doubt. He couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come, the moment when he would be forced to lay bare not just his ambitions, but his vulnerabilities. Suddenly, the urgency scaled once again, and Mark's final words punctured through the haze of John's thoughts. "We need to decide who's responsible for what by the end of the week. No more waiting." The gravity of the question gripped John. How would he balance the hopes of this collaboration with the specter of his past? And more importantly, would he have the strength to embrace the challenges ahead fully? The morning sun filtered through the cafe's window, illuminating the scribbled timelines and shift plans John had hastily compiled. He couldn't shake the feeling that these visual representations of progress were as much a binding contract as they were a guide. Responsibility loomed, pressing down on him like the loaded branches of an overripe fruit tree. As he sat across from Mark, the air between them charged with expectation, John's mind spun with a kaleidoscope of ideas, fears, and an urgent question. Where did he truly fit in this collaborative landscape? Did partnership mean relinquishing the reins of his vision, or could he harmonize his individuality with shared accountability? He was still grappling with the dichotomy of the creative freedom he cherished and the suffocating structure Mark was advocating. "Let's take stock of what we've mapped out," Mark suggested, breaking through John's spiraling thoughts. "Reviewing our objectives will help clarify your role moving forward." John nodded, folding a sheet of paper in half, the creases marking where he had drawn potential paths to success. "Right. So, we've set benchmarks at intervals for both development and user testing. But what about the unforeseen? I want adaptability in our approach." "Exactly," Mark affirmed, leaning forward. "We need a failsafe for when things don't go according to plan. Think of it as a safety net. That's where your insight into creative design will shine. You can forecast unnecessary stresses before they arise." The synthesis of their ideas began to emerge more clearly, yet John felt a nagging fear entangle his focus. Safety nets implied risks, a reminder of every shortcoming that could punctuate their journey. His past failures whispered harsh reminders, each misstep replaying in his mind like an unwanted soundtrack. "John, you've been quiet," Mark remarked, catching John's internal struggle. "What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, John ventured deeper into his vulnerability. "I guess I'm concerned that I might not keep pace. There are so many variables at play. What if my vision doesn't translate into something actionable? What if I disappoint?" He trailed off, an uncomfortable disquiet unfurling in his chest. Mark met his gaze directly. "Your worries are valid, John. But have you considered how far you've come already? You've already navigated through uncertainty and emerged with new insights. You're equipped for this, more than you realize." Encouraged by Mark's confidence, John felt a subtle shift within. A quiet storm of determination began to rise, fueled by his mentor's belief. "All right then, let's define our individual responsibilities," he asserted with renewed vigor. "I want to set actions that maximize my strengths in design while effectively collaborating with you." Mark smiled. "Now that's the spirit I hope to see. Let's break it down. What do you excel at?" "Assembling user-centric experiences that not only meet needs but also delight the user," John declared, a glimmer of passion brightening his tone. "I want to ensure that pitfalls in our development are addressed early through user feedback loops. The more we can involve users in the process, the more insights we'll gain." Mark's nod was approving, his enthusiasm palpable. "Great, and I'll focus on the structural elements, ensuring our timelines and resource allocations align. Together, we'll create a cohesive strategy." As they fleshed out responsibilities, John could feel a palpable shift. Each note they penned felt like a brick laid in the foundation of something greater. Yet, beneath that initial high, a nagging worry still crawled within, a question that curled around his thoughts insistently. How would he sustain this momentum when challenges eventually arose? Brushing the thought aside, John pushed forward, buoyed by potential. They honed in on a collaborative dynamic, balancing creativity with responsibility, and the dialogue built confidence. However, just as John felt he was coalescing into his role, a familiar specter of self-doubt knocked at the door of his mind. The foundation they were building felt precarious, unsettled by what lay ahead. Would he remain strong when the pressure escalated? "Let's make a pact," John proposed suddenly, feeling a burst of intuitive clarity. "When we face setbacks, we don't shy away from them. We communicate openly and learn as a team. Can we commit to that?" Mark extended a hand, his expression resolute. "Absolutely. We'll face everything together." In that moment, a melancholic tranquility washed over John. Perhaps it was feasible to weave his creativity into the rigid fabric of accountability. Perhaps it was a risk worth taking. And as they solidified their commitment, he could sense the contours of partnership sharpened, a promise etched in shared understanding. With their plans taking shape, John found himself hanging on to the hope that collaboration could indeed thrive under the weight of responsibility. Yet deep within, shadows lingered. A latent fear of inadequacy, unresolved, manifested into an urgent mantra of self-preservation. "Tomorrow, I'll finalize our game plan and ensure I'm clear on every expectation," John announced, injecting force into his words, the resolve disguising his internal chaos. Mark inclined his head, satisfied. "Tomorrow, we'll align on how to deliver. But don't lose sight of the journey. The ride often teaches us more than the destination." As John packed away his notes, determination coursed through him like a high-voltage current. But lurking just beneath was the chilling truth. The delivery of their project was only the beginning. The time had come to face not just the market, but the ghosts of his past failures as well. In that taut moment, as they prepared to part ways, John felt a weight shift, the burden of expectations no longer solitary. Could he, with newfound bursts of teamwork and shared ambition, rewrite the script that once trapped him? And beneath that scarred layer of hope, a frantic thought punctured through. What failed him today might very well mean the difference between success and despair tomorrow. The question then hung heavy in the air. Could he truly embrace this new horizon, or would he fall back into the shadows of self-doubt nonetheless? With the weight of possibility pulling at him, John embarked on a new phase in his life, one marked by a shift in perspective developed through intense reflection and collaboration. As he stood in the middle of his shed, a workspace transformed from a mausoleum of regrets into a sanctuary of innovation, he felt a rush of exhilaration intertwined with lingering apprehension. He was on the verge of delivery day, the culmination of countless late nights and measured risks, and the voice in his head that echoed his insecurities had begun to quiet. Revisiting the prototype, he ran his fingers over the contours, the final adjustments roundly shaping a concept that had matured through shared input and thoughtful iterations. Each tweak embodied not only a design improvement, but also an affirmation of his growth, the product of newfound confidence that had burgeoned parallel to his evolving partnership with Mark. He could feel his past failures inching further from his mind, a testament to his ability to pivot from disappointment toward hope. On the day of their presentation, John outfitted himself with a renewed sense of mission, eager to unveil his invention to an audience whose insight could elevate his vision into reality. The lessons learned, the iterative processes embraced, and the camaraderie forged with Mark coalesced into a solid foundation, one he intended to stand on firmly. As he drove to the venue, his resolve solidified into a protective armor against doubt. The conference room buzzed with an air of anticipation when John and Mark stepped inside. They began their pitch, and as John spoke, he could feel the weight of his sincerity intertwining with Mark's expertise, creating a rich dialogue that danced between excitement and grounded practicality. He deftly illustrated not only the product's design, but its potential impact on the lives of families, how it simplified daily routines, saved resources, and fostered an environment where dreams could flourish. With each slide and explanation, John felt a surge of clarity in his words and a warmth fill the room. He was not merely selling an idea. He was articulating a vision imbued with the power of resilience, shaped through personal storms he had weathered with newfound authenticity. But as questions arose, some pointed, others skeptical, the shadows of doubt briefly flickered in his mind. Would they embrace the product's potential, or would they find flaws in his reasoning? Nevertheless, John recalled the pact he and Mark had made, solidifying their approach to challenge and feedback. He embraced the moment, addressing concerns openly and inviting dialogue. The conversation felt vibrant yet constructive, building momentum rather than diminishing it. Hours passed as he engaged with the audience, their reactions oscillating between intrigue and critique, yet John's confidence remained unshaken. The quiet nuances of their reactions spoke volumes. There was engagement, there was interest. Their feedback, once a source of dread, now felt like a wellspring of opportunity. After what felt like an eternity, they concluded the presentation, John's breath hitching as applause erupted around them. A respect had formed that filled the room, intertwining genuine interest with admiration. It wasn't just about their invention. It was a recognition of the journey, the personal growth, the evolution from solitary struggle to collaborative triumph. But the true moment of realization came later, in a less formal gathering where questions bubbled with excitement and apprehension. Among those was a notable investor, his keen interest finely tuned to John's narrative. As they conversed about the prototype's implications, John reminisced about the fear that had bound him, a past still raw but no longer defining. He revealed to the investor his motivation behind the project, sharing the lessons learned with Lily as both a source of inspiration and accountability. "That's true innovation," the investor commented, visibly impressed. "It's not only about the product, it's about the heart behind it. You've created a narrative far richer than a simple business pitch. You've offered a vision rooted in resilience, something that resonates deeply in today's market." The validation washed over John like a balm. In that moment, the intentions behind his work palpably transformed, igniting a solid confidence that illuminated the space around him. He understood that not only had he achieved success in presenting his project, but he had conquered the personal hurdles that had threatened to sabotage his journey. As the event concluded, John stepped outside, the crisp evening air filling his lungs as he reflected on the day. He stood taller, an architect of possibility in both his personal and professional life. No longer was he the man falling under the weight of despair. He was a figure of resilience, equipped with the tools of authenticity and collaboration. In the rearview mirror of his car, he caught a glimpse of the protégé he had become, not just for himself, but for Lily. He was sculpting a legacy of courage and innovation, one that taught her that rising from the ashes of doubt was not just an option, it was a pathway to empowerment. The journey had been arduous, but John had proven to himself that he could embrace challenges with fortitude. With firm conviction, he anticipated new opportunities on the horizon, empowered to navigate whatever awaited him. This metamorphosis extended beyond mere success. It was an ongoing evolution, a celebration of each victory intertwined with learning experiences that would shape not only his life, but the life he shared with his daughter. As he turned into the drive, he felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. He had transformed, he had achieved, he had conquered. And with that realization burned bright, he knew his story was just beginning. Now is the moment to join this journey with growth seekers. You need to subscribe now to ensure you never miss an emotional awakening. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and share the light. Comment your reactions and resonances with this inspirational conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to grasp the power of personal transformation.